Or say, hey guys, it's Klaus. Welcome back, welcome back. Let me introduce you to huge Gamer 96. Driving his P44 Pantera. Pantera, that Italian tank. Do you know what you get if you type Pantera into Google Translate? It means panther. That's what comes up when you type it in. It's the Italian Panther. And you know what? It's an Italian tank, and we haven't done this for a while, so why not to Italy with love? It's time to talk about Italy. I have lots of subscribers from Italy, so we might as well do a shout out to Italy, right? We've shouted out Greece, and Italy's very different from Greece. Like, for instance, they wear different kinds of shoes. We've shouted out Romania, Germany, Poland. It's Italy's turn today, and I'm sorry, but it's too much. I don't think I could do it all in one video because there's just too much. Let me ask you, what's the most famous thing in Italy? Well, you know, I could ask you, and 100 of you would give me 100 different answers because there's like hundreds of. There's the Colosseum, the Venetian canals, Pompeii, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Duomo, Il Duomo. There's like thousands of Duomos, but then there's the Il Duomo, which is the one Duomo. And there's so many famous. I could just do a whole video on the people, the famous Italians throughout history. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo. That's only his first name. He has a last name. Did you know that? It's Michelangelo is his. It's a stupid first name. It's like two names, but it's his first name. And then his last name is Buonarroti. But they, like Michelangelo Buonarroti, nobody remembers that. They just remember Michelangelo. Everyone thinks it's two names. No, but it's one. It's like a pantomime. His name has two. Some names have three pantomimes. But Enrico Fermi, Marco Polo, Cristoforo Colombo, which is the politically correct way of saying Christopher Columbus these days, and Amerigo Vespucci, which America was named after him. Verdi, the composer. There's Alessandro Volta, who invented the battery. It's just there's thousands, and I could go on and on and on and on about this. You know, just talking about it, all the great things about it, Italy. But I've done a search on some of the more strange things that maybe you know, things that you might not know that we could learn here while we watch this great game. And someone's coughing in the background. Bob, stop that. Did you know that Italy has the most masterpieces per square mile in the world? Like, I mean, they have thousands of masterpieces, and it's not a very big place. Like, as opposed to Canada, where we have like no masterpieces, and like, we're the size of Russia, right? So, and Italy has more masterpieces than anywhere per square mile. Well, probably more than anywhere, anyways. And 4/5 of Italy is mountains, so they, you know, all the masterpieces are kind of crammed around only 1/5, where the people, and they got to be really careful not to damage them because it's pretty crowded with all those masterpieces. You got to drive around them, and they're everywhere. There's naked people everywhere, statues. I've seen pictures. I've seen that statue of the naked man sitting on a turtle, and you know, with his balls hanging over the turtle's pulled his head in. It's like it's masterpieces everywhere. And Italy has been responsible. Italy has introduced the world. They claim that they have introduced the world to ice cream, coffee, and even French fries. That's right. They made the first French fries, which then the French started eating, and you know, those French, that's ours. You know, they claim. But it was the Italians that made the first one. They didn't. The Italians, they tried. They made them. They tasted like shit. They said, we're not eating that crap. Let the French have them. So, I mean, if you go to Italy now, you can't get French fries. But they made them first. And in fact, the French fries appear in the first cookbook ever made, which was and this is a written book in 1474, is the first ever cookbook written by Bartolomeo Cicci. Who was, I guess, a chef or whatever. He liked cooking, and he decided to make a cookbook. And there was only one because they couldn't make copies, and so nobody read it. But he put all his recipes in there, and it was the first one ever made. The word Italy itself comes from, it means calf land, which is why today most Italian men, when a woman with nice calves walks by, there's a lot of whistling through pride of their country's naming. Or Italy is about the size of Arizona. It's slightly larger than Arizona, but there's 55 million Italians that live there. Can you imagine that? If there were 55 million people in Arizona, like, that would be fucking nuts, I tell you. The author of Pinocchio was Carlo Collodi in 1826. Well, that's when he was born. I don't know when he wrote the book. But he wrote Pinocchio, which everyone assumes means big fat liar, but Pinocchio actually means pine nut. It's kind of an ingredient that you use when you make pesto, and I guess he liked the pesto, and I don't know. It's a book about a guy's nose that grows, but it's called pine nut. Whatever. Anyway, he was the author. One of the most treasured possessions and most treasured possessions of this country is a raggedy old piece of cloth that they call the Shroud of Turin. It's an ancient, it's like a face cloth, and I'm not sure of all the details, but I think that some people believe that that Jesus himself may have like wiped his face after eating and left an imprint on it or something. And so now they keep this cloth. They've never washed it, and some people, if you look at it with the right angle of light, believe they can still see the face. It's like a magical. Anyways, they never throw anything away, right? Even dirty laundry is important in Italian heritage. Scientists believe that this cloth is no longer than 420 years old. But the debate rages. But one thing that's known for sure is that in the 1800s, the late 1800s, it was the British that introduced the Italians to soccer, or as it's called in Italy, calcio. The British handed them the ball and said, you must, they explained all the rules and everything. And very quickly, the Italians have figured it out and now beat the British all the time. And it's one of the only things that Italians do that British people do as well. It's just that the Italians do it a lot better now. There is that. The Italian birth rate is the second lowest in the Western world. Okay. But the Italian sex rate is the highest in the Western world. And most Italians are Catholic and do not use contraception, so you can derive your own conclusion there as to the state of the manlyhood of the Italian, so on and so forth. Yeah. Italy was one of the founders of the EU and is still a member of the group of 7, the G7, a forum of the 7 most powerful nations in the world, economically powerful nations in the world. Although recently the economy has had some problems and is having a kind of a debt crisis, and Italy's economy has lagged behind the rest of Europe, although it is still the 7th largest economy in the world, which is more a statement of how much the rest of the world is fucked as opposed to how well Italy is doing. Galileo Galilei, that's his first and last name. It's another one of those strange names. You could go Galileo or Galileo Galilei. Either he was born in 1564. He was a scientist, and he was the first guy, one of the first guys that argued that the Earth revolved around the sun, that the sun was not the center of the solar system. And for that, he was imprisoned in his own home by the Catholic Church. Can you imagine that? In prison. He was a heretic, and he was imprisoned. He died in 1642, but it wasn't until 1992 that the church apologized. They came out and said, oh yeah, we've really thought about this over the last 450 years, and we realized, hey, our mistake. Italy they basically invented the fork. Before Italy invented the fork, everyone used sticks. And it wasn't until they started eating a lot of pasta and they had a lot of trouble picking it up with the stick. So they did invent the fork. And they love twirling the pasta on the fork. And that's true. Or maybe they didn't invent it, but it became very popular in Italy, and then everyone had to own one. It was like the thing to get for a while there in Italy. Now everyone has one, but for a while there, it was like like the new iPhone. In Italy, if you have to be 18, and you can vote for the parliament called the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house that really doesn't do much, but you have to be 25 to vote for the upper house, which kind of runs the show. Eh? It's pretty smart, eh? But even doing that, having those rules, it was well known that Italian politics it's really fucked. So it doesn't really help. Italians like to yell and they like to swear at each other, kind of like as a friendly thing, especially when they're driving. If you've ever driven in Italy, you must swear at everyone who passes you, and you must beep at anyone who changes lanes within your peripheral vision. And it's kind of a fun, playful thing. And I was actually in Italy a few years ago. I was in Florence, and Florence is this great place where you can walk around everywhere and see all these magnificent things. And there's not a lot of traffic because the streets are closed to cars. But I caught on to a couple of things. When you take a taxi, kind of a bus thing, from the train into the main Florence, or was it Venice? No, it might have been Venice. I can't remember. It was one of those places where there's no driving allowed. And on the way in there, the shuttle, every time someone passed by, there was honking and there was leaning out the window, arms waving, and what the driver really liked to say all the time was "Testa di cazzo!" Oh! Stuff like that, which if you don't have to use Google Translate, because I know what that means. That means dickhead. And it's a kind of a playful, Italians love to, make fun like that. So I was in, it was Florence. I don't think I've ever been to Venice. It's one of those places anyway. And I was walking around, and I was obviously looked like a tourist, right? Because I'm wearing my running shoes, which Italians do not wear running shoes. That's another thing I should mention. You do not wear running shoes unless you're running. But I was wearing my running shoes and shorts. Italians do not wear shorts outside. Okay, it doesn't matter. So I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and I think a baseball cap, and Italians do not wear baseball caps. So I should mention that too. And I was walking across the street and this car was coming by, and I'm used to, like in Canada, we don't give a fuck and we just cross. And Italians, if you do that, they'll run you down. You got to look both ways and really be careful because cars have the right of way. And I remember walking out in front of one thinking, well, he'll stop. I got to get across here. I'm not waiting. And the horn went out and the window opened and he leaned out, that guy in his little Fiat, and he looked at me and he said, "Ah, che cazzo fai? Testa di cazzo!" Obviously, knowing that I was a tourist, but I'm standing in the middle of the road there in front of him, and I remember this like it was yesterday, because I catch on quickly, and I looked at him and I said, "Oh, me testa di cazzo? No, you testa di cazzo." And he looked at me and said, what the? Just perplexed, the expression on his face. He looked left, he looked right. He said, "No, you testa di cazzo." And I said, "No, you testa di cazzo." And he said, "No, you testa di cazzo." And I said, "No, you testa di cazzo." And we were going back and forth like this. And there was like 30, because Italy's crowded, there was 40 or 50 actual Italian people coming out of the shops and standing on the side of the road, looking, and eyes just, it was like a performance, and they were cheering, going, "Yeah, viva, oh, they were just thought it was great. Bravo, bravo." And after yelling at each other for about, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, "You testa di cazzo. No, you testa di cazzo." We both stopped. We looked around and looked at all the other people. And I kid you not, the guy in his little Fiat there, he looked at me and he just smiled and he said, "Bravo, bravo." And he drove off. And it was fantastic because Italians are great. Salvatore Stallone, Roberto De Niro, Alessandro Pacino, Giuseppe Pesci, Martino Scorsese, Roberto Benigni, and even Dean Martin is Italian. Basically, everyone who's any good at anything is probably Italian. And shout out to all you guys from Italy. I'm going to come back there and visit again one of these days. And instead of running around and looking at all the beautiful naked statues and buildings and masterpieces, I'm going to talk to the people and sit around and drink some vino and cappuccino and espresso and maybe a couple of shots of grappa or some limoncello and enjoy myself just waving my arms around, calling everyone Testa di Cazzo! Shout out to Italy! Oh, the last thing I forgot to mention is Italy is the country that has the most sculpted marble penises in the world. There's nowhere else where you are literally surrounded by marble penises, sculpted magnificently everywhere.